Well, just before the Olympic break, PWHL star Hilary joins the 50-point club, and she and many other PWHL players, 61 to be exact, are headed to the Olympics, or maybe by the time you're watching have already arrived. But what exactly are they arriving to, Rachel? We're going to break it down. What are some of the reports from reporters who are already on the ground about the Olympic Village, about the ice rinks? And speaking of ice, we're getting reports that it's been confirmed that ICE agents will also be in Milano. We're going to talk about that and more on today's episode of At Even Strength. This is Black Rosie Media's women's hockey podcast. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is L Ayala. I'm the founder of Black Rosie Media and a co-host of At Even Strength alongside Rachel Donner. And Rachel, again, lots of big news to talk about. The exciting thing is that we are less than 7 days away from the start of the women's hockey tournament. And Black Rosie Media will be boots on the ground. Jordan Dabney and I will be there. I fly out, or I'm set to. We'll see what Atlanta weather has to say about it. I'm set to fly out to Milan tomorrow, Saturday. But there are a lot of things still in flux. We've been keeping eyes and ears on what's happening with the arena, but a recent post, Rachel, shows that perhaps the Olympic cafeteria in the athletes' village is not ready. This is coming from Ken Childs, who's on the ground. This is kind of wild that, again, the women's tournament, among other competitions and other disciplines, actually starts before the opening ceremony. And again, we're less than 7 days away from those competitions, and there's a lot of infrastructure that seems to be incomplete.
Yeah, it is a little scary. I think, we heard like dribs and drabs about this earlier on in the conversations as we were looking at the construction work on the ice rink itself. Then they sort of added some of this onto it because like the sliding venue wasn't ready either, like where bobsled and skeleton and all that. So,
Yeah.
it's not just a hockey thing. This is now affecting, athletes across sports,
Right.
in terms of the food and nutrition, which is so critical for elite athletes.
Yeah, it's huge. And so we do know, I can at least report from what we've seen in the Summer Olympics, like Team USA basketball, the men's and women's team, they actually stay in hotels so they can control a few of those other things. That was a little bit of a hot button topic ahead of Paris 2024 because of the lack of air conditioning in Europe, just in general. And that is not something that is necessarily optimal for athletes. And so we saw that there are some federations that will just they'll do hotels and they'll make those kind of accommodations. I don't know that what exactly USA Hockey does historically. Again, the first Winter Olympics I went to, the COVID Olympics for the Winter Games, a little bit different. But I think it'll be interesting to see, and that's something that I'm going to follow up with USA Hockey. Like, where are the actual athletes staying? With the return of NHL players, I would not be surprised, right? If we see them hunkered in hotels, but I mean, it's just barren. Like the cafeteria, no tables. Like even if there was food prep, like where do they eat? It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that obviously, to your point, the NHL players are going to get the bigger spotlight, unfortunately, in terms of the attention on this. But that is a good thing because you have the NHL players there that are elite, world class athletes that are more well known, especially in North America, that can bring the attention to it. So, there's good and bad in terms of that.
Yeah, 100%. And again, we are not getting the greatest reports regarding the ice arenas. Now, the last reporting as of a couple of weeks ago, and if you want to follow up on this, we do this reporting at Gold Medal Dispatch, which is part of Black Rosie Media, and we have a free version and a subscriber version of the Gold Medal Dispatch, our limited run newsletter. So we've been keeping up with this, but the latest that we've heard is that the ice, Rachel, is ready. The last run throughs ahead of the Olympic tournaments apparently passed all tests as far as the ice quality. And that is a significant thing because, ice rinks and the ice quality also can be very dangerous if not properly cared for. But what we don't know, and what I'm curious, because I will be at these arenas in the first days, is what do the facilities look like? I might be reporting from the penalty box for all I know.
Yeah, I think that has been part of what's been unclear, is in terms of what are the support facilities like. They've obviously been prioritizing, and rightfully so, in terms of getting the ice itself and the athlete,
Yep.
locker rooms, which are going to be in trailers, by the way. We know that.
Yep.
But I think that that's where the priority has been. So like everything around it in terms of media coverage and facilities and places to have like interviews and all of that, outside of the main media center, anything can happen as far as what we know.
Anything. I've got my parka, my big snow boots, and I have been known to travel with a space heater. So I will be doing all of those things in preparation. The other thing, Rachel, and again, we talked about this over in the Gold Medal Dispatch, is that we have official word that the United States delegation, which will include the vice president, their security detail will include ICE agents. And there is a lot of interesting reporting going on as to what the official capacity of these ICE agents will be. Apparently, this branch of Homeland Security has invoked, immigration law enforcement in the past, which is interesting. But given what we're seeing happen domestically here, including that there's being a roundup now of journalists in Minnesota, there are people that I think.
Let's be specific. It's Black journalists.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate you saying that. It is extremely specific, including the NABJ chapter leader, National Association of Black Journalists. Don Lemon has been a part of that. But yes, thank you. You're right. It's not just any journalists. It's Black journalists that are being rounded up. There's a lot of people that are wondering if 1 + 1 = 2 when it comes to the deployment of ICE agents for this particular Olympics at this particular time in the United States, and what is happening in real time.
Yeah, so it's interesting because there's like two levels of conflicting viewpoints on this, right? Because the national Italian government representative is saying it's fine because they're just security detail for the US delegation. The mayor of Milan is like, absolutely not.
We don't want this. Exactly.
There's an internal conflict in Italy about this. I can draw a little bit from my experience working at the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City about as far as U.S. law enforcement participation in Olympic security. Now, I understand that was in the United States, so it's a completely different story in terms of, what seems to be valid presence or not. But when I worked at the opening ceremonies venue for the Salt Lake Olympics, there were law enforcement representatives from every single level of federal law enforcement. There were DEA, ATF agents there. There were Border Patrol agents there. And it was like sort of an all hands on deck. There was FBI. There were, all the levels of federal law. Bureau of Prisons staff were relocated there. Like it was absolutely across the board. So it's not unusual for these types of law enforcement agencies to be involved in Olympic security. Bringing them to a foreign country is a different scenario, though. And that's where I think the conflict lies.
Right, 100%. And to your point, yes, there are conflicting opinions about this, even in Italy. So this is our newsletter Gold Medal Dispatch here. First, I just want to talk about what the USOPC is saying. This is reported by CNN. Italy's government is, As with every Olympics and Paralympic Games, for more than 3 decades, the USOPC works in coordination with DSS, the International Olympic Committee, and the host nation to support the Games in security planning. So that speaks to what you were just talking about, Rachel. Now, we're hearing that these officers that will be coordinated under DSS, and there was a lot of alphabet soup here, so I just want to make sure I remember what DSS actually stands for. Oh, yeah, Diplomatic Security Service. So DSS standing for Diplomatic Security Service. So like you've said, this has happened before, but the saying that they will be in a liaison and advisory capacity and will not oversee, quote, law enforcement, immigration, or policing activities in Italy. But like, what are they?
To what end?
Right. To what end? But what are they liaising? What advisory capacity? They're going to have a home at the embassy for sure. And we would imagine, again, when, as we usually use the term, dignitaries travel on behalf of the United States, I'm sure they'll travel with them. But this is what the mayor of Milan has said. This is a militia that kills. Can't we just say no to US President Donald Trump for once?
Yeah. And I know this is a hockey podcast, but this is important, right?
It is, yeah.
And, the point being that there are other law enforcement agencies already in existence, aside from ICE, that do these jobs. So why is ICE doing these jobs?
100%. But to your point, even the Italian foreign minister has said, apparently on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's not like the SS are coming, like Secret Service, I think is what he meant. Let's be clear. They're not coming to maintain public order in the middle of the streets. They're coming to collaborate in the operations rooms. I don't know that is any better, especially knowing what we know about how, at least domestically, ICE agents have used different surveillance and then utilized that at later points in time. We don't know how this is all going to play out. Again, in the newsletter, we also talk about that there is apparently an ICE out rally set to happen in Milan, which will also host that city specifically, if I'm not mistaken, will also host the opening ceremony on the same day. So this is going to be something that we will see how it pans out. I do think there will be protests, as there always are at Olympic Games. We have also seen how ICE domestically handled protests. So that just seems like a dust up is, to say the least, waiting to happen. But I'll be there and we'll be reporting on that. We want to move on and talk a little bit about the PWHL, but I also want to mention something else coming from our fellow colleagues in independent media and journalism, Rachel. We know that Kelly Pannek, I don't think we talked about it. It would have happened after our last podcast, but I suppose we should talk and mention in case anyone watching or listening has not seen. But Kelly Pannek, Minnesota native, plays for, of course, the Minnesota Frost, as well as Taylor Heisey, were both a part of post-game media in their most recent game, which we are going to talk about. At that, Kelly Pannek, a very emotional Kelly Pannek.
Very.
Yes. And I think my interpretation, I did not speak to her after, but my interpretation is that the emotion was for a lot of different things, but chief among them, again, she plays in Minnesota, is from Minnesota, and doesn't like what's happening in her community and to the people in her community. And, she had some words to share. And I think that it's Kelly Pannek being on the Minnesota Frost, being from Minnesota, having played there for really her career, right? And then also being an Olympian. It's a difficult time, but that's how important, Rachel, to me, it seemed to be for Kelly Pannek to speak out. Kelly Pannek part of her remarks were that she's grateful that she can be a part of something that happens in the community that perhaps can take the community's attention away from the heaviness of what's happening. And if people can enjoy a hockey game, that she's grateful that she can be a part of that. And that doesn't make what's happening outside of the arena okay.
Right. You were talking about Keith Porter, right?
Yes. Keith Porter, excuse me. Yes. So it was Keith Porter, Renee Good, and Alex Petrie. So that have all lost their lives at the hands of ICE agents, in particular in the last handful of weeks.
Yeah. I was like almost in tears myself watching Kelly Pannek talk, and you could just see how important this was to her to make those feelings known, right? And to support the community there that she loves. And, you know, we've watched many Minnesota Frost games and Timberwolves games and Minnesota Wild games be played amongst all of this, and with varying degrees of activism and acknowledgement around them. And, you know, I think the common thread that Kelly Pannek brought to it, which I appreciated, was we just want to be there to have these games as an outlet for entertainment and for joy for people in a very difficult situation. And I appreciate that so much from her.
Because again, for me, it was an acknowledgement in a way that she felt comfortable and that she could be a part of, and she wanted to find some positivity or you know, some community, true community in that. And it's not a stance if we pull away from just Kelly Pannek and Taylor Heisey, who was there to support her teammate. But also if we just think about the PWHL as an institution, as a league, I think has left fans wanting when it comes to how they handle certain things, including transgender policies. We know we've had conversations, you and I, before, that the owner and the namesake of the Walter Cup has direct investments in ICE detention centers. That's been something Ava and I have talked before about fans wanting to hold signs sharing their views against ICE and have not been let into arenas. And the PWHL, you know, they supported signs about lesbians, but not signs denouncing ICE. So where does the league stand? Should they make a stance? And the thing I'll say here is, what we'll hear from leagues is that, well, we don't comment on things that people don't come to us for, right? That's kind of like the blanket statement. Well, if people wouldn't go to pwhl.com on a regular basis to find out about ICE agents and social justice, more broadly speaking, then we're not going to talk about it. I've been in rooms where people say that. But my thing, Rachel, is where does that or is that faulty thinking, knowing that a lot of how we build up women's athletes is that they're role models? So is it skating on the ice that makes you a role model? Can social justice, does that mean you're not a role model? Like, what is the message that we're sending here? And where is the line that the league is setting? And is it the right line?
It's a very good question. And I think that when you look at especially what's happening in Minnesota right now and other cities, but obviously to the largest extent in Minneapolis right now, it is so beyond something in the background. It is such an issue at the forefront that at a certain point that crosses the line into everybody is open game in terms of asking about, because it is such a prevalent part of the day-to-day life of everybody in Minneapolis that it just crosses that threshold. And it's hard to say, well, when you know, in terms of where that line is. We know, like, I'm sorry, but we know with this.
I mean, I would say we've known for a while. Minnesota being a part of these conversations. I was just on CBS talking about this yesterday. We're almost exactly 10 years away. This July will be 10 years from when WNBA players wore Change Starts With Us shirts. Then that catapulted into other teams talking about it.
Yeah.
And a social justice arm just ahead of the 2020 season where they uplifted Say Her Name. We've never really seen that in hockey. We've seen the one league, we've seen the 2017, I guess, right, national team get pretty close to a boycott in a
Right.
year where they were hosting, the United States was hosting world championships. But on issues like this, we have not seen the hockey community really and that comes from players and onward, really tackle this. And is that going to change? I don't know. I'm thinking probably no. And to your point, everything else is changing around hockey. And so the lack of communication on certain things, including people have been critical of the hockey community embracing the heated rivalry kind of excitement, but not actual queer members of the hockey community. So, I mean, this is not something that's going to go away given what we're seeing. And, will we see a change in how the PWHL as a league specifically moves and operates? I don't know. And again, there is a connection monetarily, at least, between the owner of the league and an investment in detention centers.
And I want to add to this the Olympic element to it, because many, as like 30 plus PWHL players are representing their countries in the Olympics. And many of them are Americans and are going to have to represent the United States on the international stage wearing the American flag on their uniforms, right? And this is the biggest issue in America right now. And the Olympics are supposed to be apolitical, but the American flag means something very particular right now on the international stage. And these PWHL players are going to be asked questions. And like the league needs to have some sort of like decision on this, because there's going to be players from other countries probably asked about it too, and about playing in the United States in these times. So, I think there should be some sort of more clear picture about what the league's policies and what the league's stance is on this, for better or for worse.
Well, again, we will have boots on the ground. Joe Dabney and I will be in these media scrums. We'll be at practices, and we'll see how these players respond, because when you play in the world's largest sporting tournament and event, that means that global topics are likely to come up. But again, how much of that or how much of specifically ice agents coming to this year's Olympics will impact how players and even how media is, quote unquote, expected to talk about, or maybe even not talk about, these issues. We don't know. I'm getting ready to leave, just in less than 24 hours. So hopefully we'll have some answers for you. So if you're not already, follow us on Black Rosie Media, because we are going to get into this. It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for me. Even as Rachel pointed out explicitly, I didn't even want to say it out loud, because I am a Black journalist with a company that leads the way, saying we want to empower Black journalists, going to an Olympics where ICE is there with a last name, Ayala, which has a lot of different origins. So yeah, it's not a little, it's a lot on the nose for me. And I think that there's still good stories to tell. And we're going to tell the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it here. So Thank you as always for supporting us. Stay tuned and, send some good vibes our way. But speaking of good vibes, kind of led with this, I do want to get into what we saw in the last week of action here, Rachel.
Yeah.
We talked about Minnesota, led with Hilary Knight getting to 50 points. Unfortunately, it did not lead to a Torrent win. And we're going to kind of do this. We're going to recap what happened. We'll talk about the standings, but we're going to do this in our stock up, stock down kind of format here. So as we go into this Olympic break, this international break here, is there a team where you're like, absolutely, if we look at the whole of the season so far, or even just the last handful of games, stock is on the rise? Who's your first pick for stock up, Rachel?
I mean, I know we've been talking about Minnesota, but I feel like you have to talk about them in this conversation because when you look at the fact that, they had been struggling a little bit, right? And they were a little bit lower in the standings. They have climbed their way back up in the standings. And so that is absolutely a team that's been on the rise.
What did they scored 10 goals in 2 games this past week.
Yep.
So yeah, they definitely are feeling it. And again, amid a lot of tension happening in Minnesota, as we talked about at the top of the show. But 6-2 win over New York, a 4-1 win over Vancouver. So I'm with you. I think it's stock up for sure. You have to mention, I think, in our stock up category, Boston, as we broke down on our last episode, they only had that one game, and it was a close one in a shootout, but Boston gets the win. I think we've seen the gap close, and we've alluded to that for a few weeks here now, Rachel. And yet I think you still have to say stock up for Boston.
Yeah, I don't know if you say stock up because they really were already up.
That's
and
fair.
they're kind of maintaining
They're like
in a lot of ways. Yeah. But they've had like 3 of their last 5 games have gone to extra time. So they've had to work harder maybe more recently than they did earlier on. But they're still winning. And I think ultimately, like, that's the important part, right? But New York tied it up in the third period. Calty tied it up, and then they had to win in a shootout here, and with arguably the 2 best goaltenders in the league going at it there in that shootout. So I just think they're kind of maintaining here.
That's fair. I think that's fair. Yeah, the stock was so high up, they're kind of setting the pace is probably more
exactly
accurate. Okay, that's fair. And they do lead in the standings right now as at the time we're talking. It's going to be like this for a little while, folks, but standings points at 30 points for Boston, 28 for Minnesota, who we've already talked about. Montreal, they're so interesting. They're third in standings points with 27, but where would you place them, stock up or stock down?
Yeah, I would say it would be up given their last 3 games, right?
Okay.
They've won their last 3, but I still don't think they're entirely as consistent as they could be.
I agree.
Their last game against Toronto was obviously a shutout, and they played extremely well against a tough Toronto team offensively there. But we've seen some more close games where you felt like they could have maybe put it away a little bit more strongly with the offensive firepower that they do have. We saw the game that they lost to the Sirens, but then they turn around and they gut out an OT win against the aforementioned Minnesota Frost. So I think I just want a little more consistency and maybe some higher scoring output from them. Like, they're not a high scoring team.
I think that's fair. I think that's 100% fair. So let's talk about New York. I think they're so interesting when it comes to stock up, stock down at any snapshot in this part of the season. Because it's yes. The answer is yes, I think. But as of now, where would you place them? Stock up or stock down? They're 4th right now in the standings with 24 standings points behind Montreal and just ahead of Ottawa, who we'll get into next.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at micro recently, you have to say stock down just because of the results, but they've had some very good play in that time period as
Yep,
well.
I would
You
agree.
know, and to battle Boston the way that they did, especially after that really rough loss to Minnesota, like you do have to give the Sirens credit for that. And if you're looking at the big picture of stock up of stock down versus last season, it's absolutely stock up.
There you
So,
go.
you got to just widen the net a little bit
That's
to give them the full, full from the chest to stock up. But
yeah.
yeah, again, I feel similarly about them as I do about Montreal, except New York has gotten, a little bit more scoring, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, I would say so. Now, this is interesting because we've got Ottawa, Vancouver, Toronto, and Seattle left. I think there's probably two in each category. So we haven't talked any stock down yet. But if I'm looking at the four teams that we've yet to talk about, Rachel, I think there's probably two. I would say we're looking at stock down and two that we're looking at for stock up. For stock up, I'm thinking Ottawa and Vancouver. And I am looking at the last couple of weeks here. Ottawa still continues to have that seesaw. They dip up, they dip down season. We talked about that a little bit with Minnesota. And we know where those two teams ended up, right? Last season. But for me, I think Ottawa is starting to build more consistency. And I think they just have the ability to score. In theory, right? On paper, they have the ability to score in bunches, probably more effectively than the other teams. Toronto should, I think, which is why I find them so interesting. They should be able to do that, but they're not always. So I would say Ottawa is a stock up for me. And I'm right now probably going to put Vancouver in that category as well.
I might with Vancouver. I'm not ready to do that with Ottawa yet.
Okay.
I think they're still a little too inconsistent, and they let teams get back into games where they shouldn't.
That's fair. We did talk about that last week. So that's fair. I
Mhm.
always have a little sweet spot for Ottawa.
Listen, I do too, but
So that's
I gotta
fair.
I gotta be honest about it.
No, I feel you, and I think you can absolutely see it both ways. I'm choosing to see it on the more positive side, and you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong. Is it still inconsistent? Yes. Is it as inconsistent as last season's? It might still be yes, but I feel better about it. Maybe it's because I've seen them crawl out of it before. I don't know, but I think that's fair. Let's talk about Vancouver. For me, they're a stock up because they're starting to get wins. It's still not perfect, a la what we've talked about with some of these other teams, but they're getting points on the board. And that seemed like they struggled a lot. And is it fair to say that Sarah Nurse returning had something to do with it? At this
I
point, I
think
think,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. I think the trade had something to do with it too. I think, and that has helped Ottawa as well. I think Ottawa, maybe I would give a little bit more of the win on the trade, but I do think that the shakeup helped Vancouver as well. I think the combo 1-2 punch of Sarah Nurse coming back and the trade, with some just different energy on the squad has helped there. So yeah, I would agree with you about Vancouver. Is it a huge stock up? No, but it's definitely much better, I think, overall than they have been.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that means for me at least, Rachel, and I'm eager to hear what you think. But stock down right now for me is it's Seattle and Toronto. Now, Seattle, I think, could have potentially been on the stock up side. I think they were starting to pull some things together, but they didn't have a particularly good week as far as results. Now, maybe you want to say, okay, well, they're starting to put some things together. If we look at, scoring has been an issue for Seattle. They do get on the board in both games, but they're playing Vancouver and Ottawa. I don't like using the term must win game until it's literally must win, but these seemed like games that Seattle really needed to try and get these points, and they just couldn't do it. So for me, it's a stock down for the Torrent.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right there. I think that they're a better team than they are showing on the ice right now, and I think it's like their defensive play needs to get better. I think
100%.
they're just not focused 100% of the time,
Yeah.
and I think if they could just tighten things up a little bit, from a defensive structural position, they would be in much better shape because they
Yep.
have the goal scorers there. They just have to really get the transition game going better.
Transition, you said it right there. Transition, defense, because they're getting great goaltending.
Yep.
It's just that they kind of wander mentally. I do think that Aneta Terelova not being healthy this season, she did have a suspension as well, but she's been in and out of the lineup, and I get the sense that the defensive core was built, or if it wasn't built, it certainly would benefit from her leadership. She's a hard nose. She's a Czech player. She plays just like all of the Czech players. She's unassuming in her size, but her game plays big, hard, fast, strong. I mean, that's Team Czechia right there. And she has that in spades. She's got the leadership element. And it seems like they miss that. And she's, again, been in and out of the lineup. 2 times she's been out with injury. There was a suspension in between there. And I think they struggle.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well. I mean, we know what kind of energy she brings, and
Right.
it is definitely being missed.
Right. And I think also Kayla Barnes is having to play a defense first style, which she can be prolific offensively. And a part of that is, yes, of course she can score, but it's also about the transition that you're talking about when she has that freedom to be able to get up in the attack, right? And be a part of that transition, add herself in as maybe that second or third skater coming in. I think that her game, though, has to be defense first with where Seattle is. And I'm wondering if Seattle, over time, whether that's this season or not, we know the trade deadline's not till March. But I wonder if Seattle can maybe figure out their defense or just defensive assignments. I think opening up Kayla Barnes would be something I'd love to see as well. For me, it's stock down for Toronto. They've been inconsistent. I don't think they are playing the way they should, given what they look like on paper. But I've kind of felt this way about Toronto since the inaugural season, Rachel. So if you look at it historically, holistically, is it a stock up? Is it a stock down? Or are they kind of doing the Toronto thing? Probably the latter for me. But in this season, with 2 additional teams and with other teams starting to get it together, I think it's a stock down for me.
Yeah, it's hard because I kind of feel similarly to, what I said about Boston, right at the top here, is that can the stock go any higher, right? But it's like, can the stock go that much lower for Toronto? Like, it's like, are they any better or any worse now than they were a month ago, let's say?
Yeah. Okay.
And so I would say that maybe it's a little bit more alarming now than a month ago, but they only won 1 game in the entire month of January. Like, that's not great. That is not good. And I think it is very interesting that this team is coached by Team Canada's head coach, but that's a story for another day. And I guess when we cover the Olympics, we'll see how that goes.
That's a story for next week.
The challenge is there to be better.
Yeah,
is my point.
And we've talked about it before, the Troy Ryan, the Gina Kingsbury of it all. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because we will get a chance to talk about it within the context of the Olympics. Is that fair? I think yes. I think there's parts of it that is fair. I mean, it's the same personnel, and are we going to see some of the same trends for better or worse? That's the question right now that we have, because so far leading up to the Olympics, I think it has been the same. It's a little bit drab, it's a little bit stale and stagnant. It's a little bit of how do we have Daryl Watts and Natalie Spooner, and we're still not able to get things going. Those are attackers. Those are big. Well, Natalie Spooner's on the larger side, but those are fierce attackers to the net. And I just don't know if there's enough being done from a systems perspective, from a defensive perspective, to support how those two gamers can win you games. And if that's not how you want to play, then why are they on the team? But then who else is stepping up? If you want to play a different style of game, then who is the alternative? I just don't know right now. I think Malte probably goes into that mix as well as hard hockey gamer style. And I do think that that's what we're being sold for Toronto, but that's not always what we're seeing.
Yeah, I found Toronto. I'm making a move before the deadline. Like, I honestly, I think that, you could say, well, you got to pack in this season and just say, we're not going to make the playoffs. But in this league, like, you have to go for it. Like, you just do. And I think that even if you're just trying to put yourself in a better position for maybe for another expansion process and get some ducks in a row there.
Yeah.
Sure. But make a move, do something to shake up your existing roster. And if that's trading somebody who's good in the locker room, who's well liked, sometimes that happens.
I mean, yeah, this is the pro league, right? We wanted for so long. And so it's especially with that, knowing that that's kind of the case. Yeah, go for it. I say just go for it. Well, again, we'll see how it all pans out, but those are our stock up, stock down for the PWHL at this time. But Rachel, as we've alluded to several times on this podcast, by the time we're ready for our next episode, the Olympics are on. February 5th is when the tournament starts for women's ice hockey. Again, there are other sports that are also starting ahead of the opening ceremony, which will take place on February 6th. But let's get into for the first set of games, which again will be February 5th. What is your game to watch, and why is it probably all of them? Because let's talk about who we get as the bangers to open the tournament. You get Sweden versus Germany, Italy versus France, USA, Czechia, and Canada, Finland. I feel like there's so many great storylines in every single one of those matchups that if you are a women's hockey fan, you are going to love, and you should. And hopefully we, as the collective we of journalists, will do a good job hyping up this lineup, because again, so many things. Germany, kind of the new kids on the block. Sweden looking to reestablish themselves. Italy, the hosts, playing France, also newer to the beat, and wanting to prove that they belong, right? Because there's
both of those teams, right?
There's teams that are missing because of, how things do every once in a while. The politics of nations sometimes do cost their Olympians. And in the case of Russia, we've seen that now for several Olympics. And then USA, of course, we know we're going to be locked in at Black Rosie Media there, but they're taking on Czechia in the first round. I think Czechia has a lot they want to prove after the World Championships that they hosted, and missing out, I think, on an opportunity there. And then Canada. What version of Canada are we going to see? Well, they better figure it out quick, Rachel, because they're taking on Finland.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because the USA Czechia game, I think, is going to be a lot more physical, right? And the Canada Finland game is going to be a little bit more of a track meet. And that's what I see is the difference between those two games, but both are going to be very exciting. And I think Canada has a lot to prove right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot on the line for this team. So they're going to want to come out very strong in this tournament.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So for me, what is my game to watch? I mean, everyone knows I love Team Czechia. We are based in the United States. That seems like the obvious one, right? Right. I love a host nation story, and I'm very eager to see what France looks like. I already mentioned the Sweden-Germany matchup. That being said, for me, I'm taking Canada-Finland. I'm taking Canada-Finland as my game to watch. And maybe this is more of like, what's the barometer, right? What is the temperature for Hockey Canada right now? How we've been able to see what Saraners can do in the PWHL. And so I'm very excited because I had my concerns. But how is this going to translate for them? I think they really have to use this game to establish for themselves and certainly for the storylines that what we saw during the rivalry series is not the real Hockey Canada. And can they do it? Because they got to take on Finland, and that's no slouch of a team, Rachel.
Yeah, I think it is going to be a really fun game. I think, I would want to say USA, Czechia as well, but I'm going to go Italy, France, because I want to get the benchmark for these teams, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really important, and I want to see what the home crowd is going to be like.
Well, and we got to see where they're going to sit, because we know they're going to pack it in. So,
like, do they have chairs? I don't know.
They have chairs. I'm sure they'll bring their own, but they'll figure it out. Who needs to sit during a hockey game? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. But we will be there, boots on the ground. We're super excited. And then Rachel, of course, is going to hold down the fort in the US. We expect to have some great content creators that you've seen, whether in different sports for Black Rosie Media at different times on Black Rosie Media joining us. And we hope you will join us too. So if you love podcasts and hearing us talk about everything from stock up, stock down to, the more political side of the Olympics, you're going to want to stay locked right here at Even Strength. For those who are Seattle natives or have a special place in your heart for Seattle, you're going to want to check out the 206 Sports Collective, where Ava and I will break things down as they relate to Seattle sports. Ava will join me when we're talking about women's hockey, but there is a lot of Seattle-based stuff that we're going to talk about for the Olympics. And that will happen at 206 Sports Collective. And then, of course, we have the Gold Medal Dispatch, which is our newsletter. You can subscribe for free, but we have some premium content. We'll have exclusive interviews that will be at our Beyond the Podium version of Gold Medal Dispatch, but we have it all here for you. But for Rachel Donner, Erica L Ayala here, you're listening to, or have just listened to, at Even Strength, our women's hockey podcast. You can follow us now on Blue Sky. We're probably going to migrate a lot of things over to Blue Sky. The world is a scary place, including on social media, but Blue Sky has always been friendly to us. So we're going over there at Even Strength .Blue Sky social or bluesky.social. It's on the screen, and you can check it out in the show notes. But you can also find our tags there for Blue Sky, Rachel and I. But that'll do, folks. Let us know, what games are you excited to watch? And, what are you most excited for when it comes to the Olympics? And hey, a vibe check. How are you handling everything outside of sport that's happening? Let us know in the comments. I'll close out, as I usually close out my Seattle sports shows, a reminder to be kind to yourself. And please, when you're able, extend that kindness, that humanity, that grace to other people. But again, for Rachel, Erica L Ayala, and we are signing out. Peace out.